Welcome, everyone. Excited to kick off our workshop event here with Anupama from WSO2 and Ballerina. And this is going to be part of our series with Boston New Technology and some of our subgroups, including Austin New Technology and some of the specific development groups as well. Basically, Boston New Tech is an event organization that started about 11 years ago now, and really showcase. It was built for the startup and the tech community to come together and really learn from different speakers and workshop events. Learn from founder and startup stories through more fireside chat panel events, and also provide other opportunities, to learn from and even get out there and showcase what you're building and demo style pitch events as well. We're also brought to you by Prepare for VC, which is basically has three different facets of supporting the startup community between community focus. So a lot of, we organize several different event groups and have our own internal platform I can share in the chat for connecting with others in between those events as well. We have a cohort focus with a virtual accelerator program that supports startups throughout the early stage journey. And we also offer one-on-one consulting and support for companies getting ready for their fundraise. So yeah, with that, just the way we can use the platform here today is there's several different options. There's a chat section where you'll see anybody can introduce themselves. Would love to hear what each of you are working on, whether you're coming from the developer side, the entrepreneur side, or just curious to learn about the new coding language here with Ballerina. So would love to have any introductions. Feel free to share your LinkedIns and get to know each other as well. And then we can also take questions throughout the presentation, either in the chat space or in the Q&A tab. And Anupama, excited to hand it over to you to kick off our workshop today. And there's the share button is right next to the camera at the bottom, but excited for this chat. And I know a lot of our entrepreneurs and developers have been really looking forward to this.
Okay, thank you, Jason, for the introduction. So I think we can start. If there's anyone to introduce yourself, please feel free to introduce. If not, I will start with the session.
Yeah, we can get started.
Okay, yeah, let me first share my screen. Yes, it's good. And let me start the slides. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon from wherever you are joining in. And thank you for joining today's session. So today I'm going to discuss in detail about the Ballerina programming language, which is a programming language designed for cloud-native applications and especially for integration-related use cases. And before jumping to the session, let me introduce myself. I'm Anupama Pathirage, currently working as a Director of Engineering at WSO2. And also, I'm part of the Ballerina team from its beginning, since 2016. So I initially started as a developer and then gradually moved into different aspects, and currently managing the development efforts, as well as I'm engaging with the developer advocacy related things. So that's about me. Having said that, let's quickly jump into the session. Before starting, let me go through what I'm going to cover today. So this is not going to be a complete PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to do some live demo, coding demo as well. So first, let's understand what is the problem that we are trying to address, why we need a new programming language, because there are so many great programming languages, and why we need another language. And then what is Ballerina, and especially what are the unique features of the language. And then I will do a demo by showcasing some of the unique features that I am discussing. And also I will do some demo on the diagram capabilities, which is one of the key differentiator of the language. And finally, let's discuss about how you can use Ballerina and join with the Ballerina community. So that's my agenda today. Let's start with. So why we need a new programming language? So if you are coming from development background or any sort of technical background, you know there are thousands of programming languages for various purposes. So while we have all these things, let's first consider look at what happened in the past decades. Basically, this is how the application architecture paradigms have evolved in the past decades. So if we consider the earlier days, it's mainly mainframes, and we developed centralized applications. And then later on, client-server architecture came into the picture with some distributed application models. And after internet and the evolution of the internet, things have changed dramatically. And with that, cloud concepts came into the picture with different software as a service, platform as service concepts, and microservices. And likewise, things are evolving. So in future, it can be completely different thing, metaverse or whatever. But the fact here is like things are evolving, and then to adjust with these changes, we need to select right set of technologies, architectural patterns, and tools to make it easy for the developers and make it efficient. May have some efficient ways to write applications. So that's the problem, or that is the area that we are touching today. So when it comes to application development, in earlier days, it's usually what we call shared library or DLL that we are interacting with, mostly shareable unit of code. But nowadays, it's when any kind of application is usually having a front end and a back end. It can be web, mobile, or whatever the next generation device. Usually, it has a front end and the back end. Front end can be implemented using many different tools, frameworks, technologies, which are really great. And same goes to the back end. It can be developed using any of the existing languages like Java, C++, Kotlin, Rust, Go. Anything is fine. And the thing is here, nowadays, application development means it's not a single, so not a piece of code which interacts only with limited set of things. Usually we have to interact with a lot of existing APIs, and then we have to integrate these APIs to make it or combine it to one single API or multiple other APIs by extracting data, transforming data, and those things are unavoidable in the application development today. So instead of shared libraries, API has become the unit of programming nowadays. So that is the area that we are addressing here, and that's a problem because there are so many languages, as I mentioned before, but the problematic area is the right level of abstraction. Usually, all these languages are general purpose programming languages or specialize in some specific areas, but when it comes to network and cloud native application developments, that abstractions are not that enough. And also, because it's very important for the developers to focus on the business logic, not the network jargons or any other things, because dealing with various protocols, network level interactions are not that easy if they have to do all the low level stuff. And if the code is heavy and if they have to understand a lot of things to do the network interactions, it is not developer friendly. So, we identify several requirements for such a language or such a framework. Basically, what we wanted to achieve is better network abstractions, because then it will be easy for the developers to deal with the day-to-day problems or the business logic without interacting much or without struggling much with the network problems. And then the support for data representation. Nowadays, what we are uh, moving around over the network is data. In sometimes back earlier days, it was code as well in RPC style programs. We moved the code here and there, but due to various restrictions like security concerns and other things, nowadays we don't do that. But we move from one place to another place using network is the data. So we need better ways to access data, transform data, manipulate data, and do various things with the data. And also to do that, type system should be very much capable of handling these things. So network aware type system is very much important, highly important. and also wide support for wide spectrum of network protocols. Because when it comes to application development today, we are not only dealing with HTTP. It can be HTTP, WebSocket, gRPC, GraphQL. It can be anything. So we need to have first class support for all these things. And also concurrency. It's not something that we can avoid in the network distributed applications. And also cloud friendliness. We should be having easy ways of getting the code into the cloud. And one important thing is the picture, or how it looks like the entire program, because it's not usually enterprise application means a collection of multiple components. And when someone wants to understand what the program is doing and how it is interacting with other entities, going through code means a real pain. So we need to have a good representation of the entire application. And also it should be a complete platform, because writing program is one thing, and then it should come with some other supporting stuff like testing, documentation, sharing the programs with other developers and things like that. So these are the main requirements, and these are the problems actually that we faced. So if I quickly look at what is Ballerina, it is a new programming language. Although I said it's new, it's not that new. We started the development efforts in 2016. It is by WSO2. We initially started it as a WSO2 project. WSO2, if you are already aware of, if you are not aware of WSO2, it's a leading open source middleware provider, especially in the integration, API management, and identity and access control. So we are in the industry for like 15, 16 years now, and we understood the real pain of the integration developers. And then those were the things that I described in the previous slide were the real pain points. And then when it comes to configuration kind of languages and frameworks, we don't have that much flexibility. That's why we thought of introducing a new programming language. And again, it's a general purpose programming language. You can write any piece of code using that language like any other language, but at the same time, it's highly optimized or giving right set of abstractions and tools for the specific problem, that is integration and cloud-based application development. And also, although it started by WSO2, it's an open source project, and also it's driven by the community. And we have open source community around us who are helping us to improve the language, develop the language, as well as the users of the language. So in timeline wise, we started the project in 2016 officially, but the discussions went beyond that. We started the concepts around 2010 because we understood the real problem. And then we started this project in 2016 as a replacement for the Syntax, like a configuration based language, which we used for integrations. And then it went through multiple iterations, and especially improving the compiler and the internal representations. And we released the first version in 2019. And current version is 2020 version that we released in 2022. It's named Swan Lake. So if you are wondering about the names, it closely resonates with the ballet concepts, because in a ballet dance, usually you can see the dancers are uh, performing the acts in a coordinated manner. So in the same way, when it comes to integration programs, different entities have to coordinate. So that's why the name Ballerina, and how that name it as Ballerina. And also our releases are somewhat close to the ballet name. Swan Lake is the current release, and the future one will be Nutcracker, and so on. So even though we released the Swan Lake version, it's not in there. We have language improvements and many different platform improvements for support various tools and various protocols and so on. And also we work on the native implementation of the language as well. So that's the current status. And again, I want to say it's not a theoretical language, and it's very much practical and used in production in many places. And it's not a research language. It's a practical language that we are using. Not only us, a lot of other people are using. So just to let you know where the ballerina exists in the spectrum of the languages and the framework. So you can see integration products and technologies like ESB, EI, EAI, event-driven stuff, and BPM. Those things, those are not that cloud native. And also most of the things are configuration based. So that means it doesn't have much flexibility because it's somewhat restrictive on things that you can do. And on the other end, we have general purpose programming languages and frameworks. Some are specialized in some aspects, but most of the time, since they are general purpose languages and frameworks, they provide little bit of wrong abstractions when it comes to exact this problem. So the Ballerina language fits in between, and actually we are kind of we learn a lot from existing languages, and we inherited a lot of capabilities, and even the syntax is very much familiar. C family syntax is there. So if you are familiar with any general purpose language, learning Ballerina is not hard. Only thing is like it provides different set of abstractions to address this problem. And then let's quickly talk about what is unique about Ballerina. Ballerina language, we say it as a data-oriented language. That means, as I mentioned before, what we move around is data. So we've paid very high attention to this aspect, and we designed the language in a way. Data orientation is one of the key things. So the language has many different various support for different data types, including JSON, XML, tables as first class things, and it has language query support, query syntax, which is similar to SQL, where you can process data very easily, and also the type safetiness and other things ensure the representation of data and processing of data is very easy using the language. And also the concurrency, which is we can't forget. So what happens in the language is like we provide concurrency constructs as well as the concurrency safetiness to make sure the program is concurrent safe when it is running. So the developer can get to know during the compile time itself whether the program will run into a problem. That is using some mutable concepts and not allowing some of the excessive mutable things within certain areas and things like that. And the other important thing is the graphical. So usually when we explain some about our application to some other person who is not that much familiar with the application, we use the various diagrams. And usually what we do is we draw the diagram using different tools and then make it in sync with the code while we are developing. But in the Ballerina, diagram is auto-generated. There are various forms of diagrams. I will showcase it in the demo. So you don't have to worry about it. And the diagram is basically diagram is the code. That means we maintain the exact same parity. So if you edit the code, diagram will auto-generate it. And even you can edit the diagram if you are more familiar with the low code stuff. You can edit the diagram and the code will be generated. And also the flexibility type. Language is compiled. It's a compiled language, but at the same time, sometimes when dealing with JSON and other things, we delay some of the checks, compile time checks to the runtime. So we are not too rigid and we are not too flexible. We stays in the middle based on the user requirements. And also the reliability and maintainability. We are talking about enterprise applications here. So it's very important to have the reliability concepts and the maintainability concepts. Reliability comes in many different flavors like error handling, special error handling mechanisms, and concurrency safetiness, and also transactions, something which we can't forget about in the enterprise application development. And transaction is a language construct itself. And also maintainability wise, we support different versionings, module sharing, platforms, and all these things. And finally, the cloud native aspects. So if you're a developer, usually what happens is like we don't worry about how we are going to deploy it in the cloud, but language provide capabilities to generate the cloud artifacts using very simple commands so that you can customize them and directly push into the live environments of the cloud. So those are the features. Let me go through some of these things in code level as well. Then I will jump into the demo so that I can showcase in the live coding as well. So data orientedness, it is, as I mentioned before, we highly focus about the data. So plain data, that is what we transfer over wire. And then we have to convert into many different types. And Ballerina makes it very easy to manipulate and transform. If you can see, we have JSON support in the language itself, like integer, string, float in many other languages. We have JSON, XML, tables, are part of the language itself. And we have record constructs which can map and transform. Basically, you can transform a JSON into this type of record very easily. And data binding capabilities, you can see we are calling a network endpoint here and get the response as a array of in-memory data structure. Or you can make it a JSON as well. So dealing with those different data types and converting is very easy. And this is a query syntax in the language. So you are dealing the response here, and you can use usual query syntax that you are familiar with, like where, order by, limit, and select to manipulate that data very easily. And if you use a normal for each or other iterations, doing these things will be very difficult. And then the network oriented aspects. So language provides many capabilities and many abstractions when it comes to network interactions. So as I showed earlier, the data binding is very easy. You can bind whatever the data on the wire to the data on the memory using very uh, in like in inline. You don't need to do any specific things here. And also we provide different constructs when it comes to network interactions. So there are two types of network interactions usually. One is the service types, where we provide access to the clients. We provide a service, and then the other type is client. So when it comes to services, there are different types of services based on the protocol as well as the way of handling the interface styles. So this is HTTP service, for example, because it's listening on HTTP. It's a HTTP service. Actually, service is a language type, language syntax, and based on what is it is bind to, which listener, it becomes a service of that type. So since this is attached to HTTP listener, this becomes HTTP service. Similarly, you can attach GraphQL, WebSocket, gRPC listeners so that you can create services of those types very easily. And when it comes to services, we support two interface styles. One is the RPC style, for example, gRPC and other things. In those cases, we have remote methods. And for RESTful style like this one, we have resource functions. So you can define the skeleton very easily. And then it's a matter of defining the application logic. And other thing is the client concept, also very much similar and easy. In Ballerina, we have various clients for different protocols, and you can initialize them and invoke them. So this is a HTTP client, and if you want to do some get operation, it's very intuitive, and do the put the parameters and bind the data as a return type. So likewise, client concept is also part of the language. And when it comes to concurrency and reliability, we provide many constructs like any other language. For example, asynchronous function calls using futures, and also named workers so that you can do concurrent executions, and especially transactions. Transaction is this kind of a block in the language, and if you enclose whatever the code using this block, that will become an atomic execution, because transaction guarantees all the things within this block execute atomically. And also when it comes to concurrency, language provide different ways to ensure that the written program will not run into problems in the runtime when it comes to concurrency aspects. So because of the mutable variables and usages within different scopes, it guarantees the concurrency safetiness. And this is one of the graphical capability that I described earlier. So this is a generated diagram for the same code. So usually by looking at the code, sometimes when it comes to a complex code, we can't understand what's happening. But in Ballerina, you can see this is a sequence diagram. We have multiple actors here, and an actor represent one concurrent thread, concurrent actor. And within that actor, it's like a flow chart. You can see new operations, equals, and usual if-else conditions and things like that. But when we interact with multiple actors, concurrent actors, you can see the horizontal lines like in a normal sequence diagram. So here you can see we are invoking two endpoints, and that is represented by the arrow notation in the syntax itself. So usually function invocation is a dot notation like in any other language, but since we are focused on integration and the network concepts. The developer is aware that he is doing network interaction here because it's the error notation. It's not a usual depth notation. So he know that there can be certain errors that he should handle, and there are certain uncertainties when it comes to network, so that he should handle. Likewise, it doesn't look like a normal function call, so developer is aware of it, and even at the same time the diagram is get generated, because the diagram also good to know, okay, this is a network interaction. That's how the horizontal lines get generated. So it's a get operation and returns response. And by looking at this diagram, you can simply say, okay, there's a program which interacts with two different endpoints and get the response, and then appends data, and finally return the basically it doesn't return, it's a main function, and end the execution. So that is the one sort of diagram. And also other important things are data mapping capabilities. These are small tooling features. We have similar features, a lot of similar features, but I highlight some of the things which are important for the integration development. One is data mapping. So here we can map, when usually transformation is tedious thing, you have to transform large constructs from one form to other. So instead of writing code, you can simply drag and drop and do mappings and do conversions, whatever combinations, using the diagram itself. And that is very easy when you have to transform large payloads. And other thing is the built-in observability. Language comes with the built-in observability, and it is automatically observable by any open telemetry tool. And it has three versions. Like usually observability comes in three different areas: metrics, tracing, and logging. Ballerina support all these things, and when you run in the production, you can simply connect to whatever the existing things, for like Prometheus, Grafana for metrics, Jaeger for tracing, for example, and you can publish logs to Elasticstack very easily, and then those capabilities are built in. And finally, code to cloud aspects. So this is a simple service that I showed earlier as well. This is a simple hello world service which runs on port 9090 and returns a simple text when invoking. Then usually bell commands. Bell command is a command line tool, comes with the Ballerina installation. Usually bell build is used to build an application, generates artifacts. And if you combine it with this flag, minus cloud, with Docker or Kubernetes or whatever the artifact type, it will generate the Kubernetes files, Docker files, and other things. So you can customize it. It extracts information from the source code itself and generate dependencies and other things. At the same time, you can customize the things using the cloud toml if you really want to configure things. So that's how it happens. And after explaining all these things, I would like to quickly jump into the demo so that I can explain things in practical way. So I will switch to the terminal. I hope you can see my terminal here. And
Yeah, just one quick question.
Yes.
Is there either a version available online or that we can send out afterwards for people looking to review the deck?
You mean slide deck?
Yeah, the slide. Yeah, we had a question about if there'd either be a PDF or PowerPoint version that we could send out afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. Right now I'm on the Google Slides, but I will download it and make it a PDF and send it to you
Okay,
so that you
perfect.
can share it, right?
Appreciate it.
And if you have any questions so far, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, I will go through the demo, and please interrupt me if you need any clarification. So Ballerina, you can download it using ballerina.io. So the first time you have to go to download page and download it. It has different installers, and after that, after the first download and installation, you will get the bell command. So this is a bell command, and this is a help text of it. It has many different commands, and after the first installation, you don't need to use installation, because in the command itself you has the capability to update and even switch the versions or revert the versions, whatever the things. You don't need to go to the installations again. So it has many different commands, basically the core commands to the various stages of the compilation, like building, running, testing, document generation, and things like that. And if you want to make it a package and share it, using package sharing mechanisms. There are commands for that, and there are other protocol specific commands to generate various artifacts related to protocols and generate OpenAPI specifications, GraphQL schemas, and things like that. And also the distribution commands to update the distribution, Ballerina version basically, or switch to different versions. So since I have the Ballerina installed already, this is my current version. I will initialize my project. So what you have to do is bell new and the project name. I'm in an empty directory. You can see I don't have anything here. And if I do bell new, let's say project name is music search. I'm going to develop a REST API to search music tracks. And I created a new Ballerina project. And if you see the file structure now, it created 2 files. So from here onwards, I will switch to VS Code because Ballerina has a VS Code plugin. It's very easy to develop from there. So I open up my newly created project in VS Code, and you can see the 2 files here. One is a main.bal file, which is usual main program, like in any other programming language. And if you can run it while it's running, I'll explain the Ballerina toml. This is kind of the file which identify a given folder as a Ballerina project, which contains a metadata about the project, like the organization, project name, the version, what the Ballerina version which is used to develop this project, and observability stuff, whether observability is enabled, and so on. So you can see, since I ran the program, it prints the output like usual language. So let's do something a little bit interesting here using network interactions. So today my use case is I'm going to extract some value from a third-party endpoint. For that, I'm using iTunes Search API, which is freely available. And I can basically take this. It has various search capabilities. Let me quickly copy one such URL. So I will first do the curl command, nothing related to Ballerina. I just wanted to showcase the output of this API call. I use the JQ to prettify the JSON output as well for clarity. You can see it gives a JSON response with an JSON object with an JSON object array as well. So this is the output from the API call, and I'm going to get the same thing using Ballerina within few single steps. So what we have to do is we have to create HTTP client here. And let's say these auto suggestions are from my GitHub Copilot, but I will not use those things most of the time. I will write it for you. Let's say iTunes client. And then I will initialize it. So if I copy paste my URL here for clarity as well, let me copy paste here. This is the URL that I'm going to invoke. So I'm going to initialize the client to invoke this endpoint, this endpoint. So I have to put the base path here. And this is the initialization of client. As you can see, when I type the code, it has imported the Ballerina HTTP module, which provides the client capabilities. But you can see there's an error here. It says it is expected the HTTP client, but the return type is client or error. You can see a pipe here. It says the O, that means union of things. It can return either a client or error. That is because this is a network interaction. Initializing client means it is a network interaction. So there can be errors during the process, which is unavoidable. So that we have to handle the error. Usually in other languages, errors are thrown as exceptions. But in Ballerina, we carefully not do that. We handle the errors. We allow the developers to handle errors as they want. And then it's a carefully thought process without simply throwing it. So it can return error. What we have to do is then the return type is a union. Ballerina support union types. So the return type is either HTTP client or error. So error goes away. Now to use it, actually, we have to handle the error. So what we have to do is there are different ways of handling errors. The first way of handling error is we can check whether the iTunes client is error. And if it is error, we can simply do some login or whatever, and then let's say return the error. We can return the error to the calling function. because now iTunes client is error type, we can simply return it. And then it again gives an error because my main function signature doesn't support returning anything. That means it's returning null or nil in Ballerina. So we have to say it returns error as well. So in the if clause, we are returning error, and in the after if in the success case, we are not returning anything. In that case, we can say it is returning error or nil. Nil. This is nil notation that is similar to null in some other languages. So we say our program, this function will return error or nil. There's a shorthand way of to say the same thing, error question mark. That means error or nil. If you say int question mark, it's int or nil. So that's a shorthand way to represent the same thing. So this is kind of a way to handle errors, but it sometimes looks like too much because sometimes we really don't need to handle error. Maybe we can pass that responsibility to the calling function. So what you can do is we can use check expression here. If you use check here, that means that the meaning of that is if there's an error from the next expression, it will check for that and it will return the error if it is an error. Otherwise, it will return the desired type. So that means we don't need this if else if block anymore. And also, since we are checking the errors, error won't come here because it's returning if it is an error. So it will come here. So we can simply avoid all the other boilerplate code. And now we can use iTunes client to invoke the operation. So I'm using get operation of it because this is a simple get call. So let me copy this part as well. And this is the get call. And what we can do is, since we know it's JSON, we can bind the result to the JSON type. So we can say iTunes response is a JSON. We can simply assign it to JSON. Again, you can see an error because this is again a network call which can result in error. You can simply check here as well. So that error is gone. So if we quickly print this output, you can see the same thing that we show in the curl command. Let me quickly run it and print with the JQ to prettify the output of the println. So you can see the same response. It's a JSON array, JSON object array with the same data. So you can deal with JSON here. You can do many access operations using JSON because in language, JSON is something that we support as a first class thing. So you can access JSON to do, let's say you want to access the intermediate array, but results array, you can simply say it's a JSON array results. And iTunes response has a results construct. If you go up here, you can see this is a results. This element is results. So you can access it, and it gives an error as well because at the runtime we don't know whether really this exists or not. At the compile time we don't know. It's a runtime thing. So at the runtime it can fail if the response doesn't contain this. So in this case also we have to check the error. So with that it will go away, and then you can basically access the values within that results. Basically you can use this kind of notations, and let's say we want to access the track ID. You can simply access using the dot notations, and also similar to array access. So if we quickly run this, you will get the first track ID of the first element of the array. So likewise, JSON access is not also hard, but only thing is like at the compile time, it can create, at the runtime, it can create issues if things are not available. So that is where we use the record types. So you can see the track ID is printed. So to use the record type instead of JSONs, what we have to do is we have to create a record which is equivalent to this format, which is again kind of a difficult thing because it's a big JSON payload with a lot of fields. So if you have to write a record here, we have to spend a lot of time to write it. So Ballerina provides support some easiness here. What you can do is you can simply copy the full response, full JSON thing. I'm going to copy this full JSON payload, and I just copied it. And then what you can do is use Ballerina utility here. In the command palette, you can say paste JSON as record. I just copied this response, and when I say paste JSON as record, it will create all the records for you. So you can simply rename it. Let's say rename this into iTunes response, and result item into iTunes item. Just for clarity, you can use the existing names. Then this represents exactly the JSON that we are receiving. So instead of JSON here, you can say this is iTunes response. And instead of these values, now you can access this response because you know the structure of it, not like the JSON, which is not quite sure. But here we know exactly in the iTunes response, it has an array like this, and then we can access this array, and then we can access using the index, and using the dot notation you can access various elements. So this guarantees at the runtime also it is not failing because we know the structure during the compile time as well. So that's the advantage of using records. So now since we have completed the main program, let's make it a little bit interesting by converting it to a service. So to write a service, what you can do is basically where there's a tooling support to generate code snippets for various services. These are the different services type available for different protocols. I am using HTTP service, so I just used it, and it will add a code snippet. And what I have to fill is the port number. Let's say I'm running on port 9090, and then I have to provide a base path. Let's say it's a store. My business place is a music store. So this is a service skeleton. Since this is an HTTP service, now I have to define resource functions as well. So this is a resource function code snippet. I have to provide the accessor. Accessor is either get, post, delete, patch, those usual HTTP verbs. So I am using a get, I'm providing get support here, and path is the subpath. So let's say tunes. This is my subpath. This is usual function syntax similar to that. And then within that, I'm going to call this one. And instead of this one, let's use JSON for now, for clarity. Let's format the code as well. And then it gives some errors because this is returning error, but my function signature is still not returning any error. So what I have to do is I have to say returns error or nil in that case as well. Error JSON actually, because I'm going to return this JSON from this resource. What you can do is return iTunes response. So my return type should be either JSON or error. If there's a network issue, it will return error, or else the success case, I will return the JSON. So in very simple format, I can return a JSON from my service. So let's comment out this for now because I'm not interested in main program anymore. Let's quickly run it and see how we can invoke it. Basically, it will give the same output because I'm just proxying it, the response that I'm getting. There's an error because I have unused variable, unused import. Let's run it again. So this is how you can return JSON. Let me take another curl as another command terminal as well, so that I can invoke the service. So simply what you can do is localhost 9090, and base path is store. This is store, and then the subpath is tunes, and you will get the same output. And if I just invoke it again using JQ, you can see the same output. So that is simple thing because it's JSON. Now let me explain some other concepts in the language to showcase some other capabilities. Usually in the API design world, API design best practices, what we are saying is we have to be liberal on what we are receiving. That means third-party APIs can change their versions and send more data. So that means we have to be open on what we are receiving, and we have to be very much conservative on what we are sending out. So here you can see we are sending out JSON, but it is not that API friendly because it can change at any time. We don't know exact fields and so on. So what you have to do is we have to define a type to exactly represent the output type so that it will be API friendly, and you can generate open API specifications very easily without any ambiguity. So we can define a closed record. Here you can see this is an open record, and if you put some pipes in between, that is what we call closed record. But since this record is used to get the payload, we can't use pipes here because this is an open record. And even maybe we are not interested in all the fields. Let's say I'm interested in few fields of the incoming response. Then I can remove all the other fields. Let's say I'm interested in these 3 fields, and maybe collection price, and also let's say track time. Then I can remove all the other fields, and basically that means since this is an open record, I don't care about the other stuff. I'm interested only these things, and it won't fail because it's an open record, and it means it can have more fields, but I am not interested in. So then to send some output from my service, I have to define the exact record to match with the output. So let's define it as let's say tune, and this is what I'm going to return. So I can define string artist, same thing, but it's a closed record. String collection, I'm using different names than the previous record just to showcase the we don't need to match it. String track, and decimal price, and finally int time. So this is the thing that I'm going to return. So instead of this one, let's try to return it. So to return that, what we have to do is, so this is instead of JSON, now let's use these records that we already created. So iTunes response is something that we are getting. Let's remove this return for now. And then we have to construct this one. For that, we can use the query capabilities as I show in one of the slides. What we can do is we can select the required field. From the iTunes response, we have to iterate this one. So from iTunes item I in iTunes response results. This is the thing that we are iterating, where we have to select the stuff. So Copilot has created some stuff for me. Let me take those things to save the time. So you can see basically it creates this record, artist collection, by iterating the values in this, and this is the thing that we can return now. You don't have to iterate and construct it again because it returned it, and this what we are returning here is now tune array. From this query expression, we have created this tune array, and also it has various capabilities like order by and other things, because sometimes in order to implement order by and other things in usual iteration, it's very hard. So what we can do is before select, we can add an order by condition as well, so that it will order the result based on the requirement. Order by, let's say, I dot price, selection price ascending, then it will return the response ordered as well, sorted as well. So let's quickly run it without taking much time. Let me run it. And now since we are interested on a few fields, we won't get this full response because I cut down it to the requirements. So this is the same request, and let's see what we get. So you can see only the interested fields are here, and if you scroll a little bit up, you can see it's ordered by the price, and it's gradually increased. Price is increasing. So this is how we can use query expressions, and it has a lot of other capabilities, including limit, where clause, and other things which I'm not using here. So that is the first part of it, and let's see how the generated diagram looks like. So this is a service. So it has few records in the top, and then it has HTTP service, and if I expand it, you can see it has one get resource function here, and within that resource function, you can see the logic. So it's calling iTunes client and getting the response and do some processing. You can even expand this here. And even you can add stuff here. If you add something here, you can see I added if else expression. And if I add true for simplicity, it is getting added here. And if I delete here, it is getting deleted. So it is no longer in the diagram. Likewise, we maintain the exact same parity, and that is the basically the intended behavior. And
yeah, and then we had one quick question from Peter about what the Viz code, or sorry, that it has a Viz of code flow, and was asking if we could see that.
Sorry, I didn't get the exact question. Can you please repeat it?
Did I see it has a Viz of code flow, and can we see that?
Code flow. What do you mean by code flow?
Yeah, Peter, if you want to expand, or you can if you use the Q&A tab. Oh wait.
Okay.
Sure. Or yeah, we can keep going while.
Yeah, if you can explain what you mean by code flow, I can explain it further. But this is I guess it's related to diagram, and if that is the case, this is the diagram.
Oh right, yeah, you said in the sample image I saw a code diagram. Okay, yeah, that's great.
So it's a VS Code feature. You can get the diagram for any of your code using this icon. So now we have simply created a simple service, and I don't take too much of time on it. And let's say now as a next step, we want to transform it to something different. So how we can do it? Let's say this is not the format that we need. Let's say it is a format. Let me copy different format of response. Let me quickly copy that and paste it in the editor so that you can see the expected format. Let's say I want this kind of format instead of this thing. Some discounted price as well instead of raw price. So then what you can do is you have to simply transform this one. So there what you can do is we can define a transform function. This is a kind of a inline function, and there's a design option here. So for that one, what we have to provide is the input and output. Input structure and the output structure. So the input structure is the iTunes item here. So because we are iterating this iTunes item, so we can provide existing record here, iTunes item, and it's an array, and that is the input. And let's rename this function as transform for the clarity, and the output type is a new payload, new type. So we don't have a record representing that, it's a new one. So we have the output JSON. So we can simply paste that JSON, and let's say it's a discounted tune. And then we can ask the tool to generate the required record for us and save it. And this is the one that we are returning, and it's again an array. So we can mark it as an array, and then we can save it. So now you can see in the diagram, you can map. But if you obviously map this existing iTunes item to the discounted item array, you will get an error. So this is simplest mapping that we can do, but the fields are not matching as we expected. We got an error. So it says these mappings are not found. So what you can do is we can convert it to a query easily using the diagram itself. So it gives a capability to map. Let's say you want to map artist name to artist. Here you can simply drag and drop. I just minimize a little bit, zoom out a little bit, and then let's say you want to add collection name and the track name into the string album, both fields separated by a pipe. So then what you can do is we can simply map both the fields into this one, and then it's just a matter of adding more processing to that. Let me refresh it. I added one field, and then let's add the other field as well. Let me first add this one, and we can edit for the price. Let's say we are adding some discounted price, so it has expression editor as well. That means I want to do some arithmetic operation to multiply it by some discount price. Let's say I'm giving 5% discount. That means I'm multiplying by 0.95, and I'm saving it. So it is automatically added to the code as well. You don't worry about the code at this point. And now I'm For some reason, it's not allowing me to track this. You can do the same thing in the here as well. Basically, you can drag two things into this one and then map as you need. So this, let's say track time in millis, you can drag it here. So this is a very simple format of mapping, but it can be any complex thing. To save the time, I don't use my complex thing. And if you look at what it get generated is, it generated the transform function for you, basically based on the mapping and whatever the expressions that you have written. It can be any complex thing, arrays, a combination of arrays and other things. When you are doing it visually, you don't have to worry about the nested levels and other things, because in visual level it will give you very good understanding. So instead of returning items from here now, previous tune here, you can simply return the discount tune. This is the auto-generated item here. Let's make it a closed record again so that we are adhering to the API principles. We don't need closing and closing one because we are returning array. So we can simply return discounted tune item here. And then instead of this select clause that I manually return, you can simply use a transform function. So it will return the transformed response. So I will not going to invoke it because it's going to take my time. So that is the end of this demo. And let me quickly showcase some other diagram capabilities so that you can get an idea. So there is an existing project and it contains many services, and it's a collection of Ballerina service, many projects. It's a complex scenario of a shopping cart. And then here, if it's a multiple projects and if you want to see the diagram of it, one thing is like, if you, let's say if you open this one and this bell file, you can see the diagram specific to that service. This is a one single service and it has a sequence diagram view for that service and the resource functions, and you can expand each resource function and it gives a diagram for each of them. But let's say this is a complex application with multiple services, how you can see the interactions. We provide the capability for that as well. That is what we call project design diagram. So without doing anything explicitly, it derives the diagram for you and you can see the interactions. It has many services. Some of them are gRPC, some of them are HTTP, and these services are interacting with each other. And if I expand a little bit, it has many levels. This is the first level, and if we look at the second level, it will show more details, like this HTTP service has this many resources, and let's say a given resource is talking to many other resources. If you can see, the highlighted lines will show what are the other endpoints or other services which this service is calling. Likewise, you can get a very good high-level idea about the entire application without looking at the source code. And even if you look at the third level, the type diagram, it will give the idea of how the types are interacting with each other. Different types defined in the services, and whether they are one-to-one mapping or one-to-many mappings, things like that. So all the type diagrams are type relations. For example, in a cart body, it has multiple cart items, one to many relationship. Likewise, you can see the full picture of the entire thing visually without any additional effort. So that is the diagram capabilities of the language. So that is the end of my demo. Let me quickly go back to my slides so that I can continue the rest of it quickly. So I showcase some of the key features, and I didn't go through that one last thing on that cloud build. I will just do it while I'm explaining the things so that I can save time. So here what I have to do is, so far what I did was I directly ran it using bell run command. Instead of that, if I use bell build -- cloud equal Kubernetes, I want to generate Kubernetes artifacts basically. So if I show the target folder quickly, this is my target folder. I don't have anything other than the cache here. So let me build it quickly and it will generate the relevant artifacts. So we don't need this terminal now. So since I requested to generate Kubernetes artifacts, it is generating. It has multiple steps and it will take a little bit of time. Yes, it generated and it gives the commands to deploy the Kubernetes artifacts as well, and you can find the artifacts here. Now in the target folder, you can see the Docker file is here. It's generated with all the dependencies, and it took some information from the program itself, like the port and dependencies and things like that. And if you go to the Kubernetes folder, you can see the YAML file with the services deployment and other things. And since I don't have a cloud.toml in my project, I didn't customize anything. Ideally, I should have cloud.toml as well, so that you can customize some of these values, memory, CPU values, whatever the things that you want. These are the default values. So that is how we generate cloud artifacts, and you can simply use these things to deploy on the cloud. So having said that, let me quickly finish the rest of it. So Ballerina is not a JVM language, although right now it is written in Java, and also it generates JVM bytecode. That is as a proof of concept, like the language is designed, the syntax is designed, and now it's in the production level thing, and many people are using it in production, but still it generates Java bytecode. But it's not Java language, JVM language, because we carefully design the language to be independent of Java and JVM, and the semantics are very much different. And we are working on the native implementation of it so that it will generate the native bytecodes in future. We don't have the JVM dependency at that point. And also we recently introduced the native flag into the build command, which generated the Graal VM based native executable, so that you can get the native images anyway, even right now. So then last thing is, Ballerina is not just a language. It provides the full platform capabilities, including the VS Code plugin that I showed you with all the plugin capabilities and graphical editing. And also it provides tools for various schema generations for different protocols, and it provides API documentation generations, testing generations automatically with few commands. And it has a sophisticated library, standard library with all the protocols. And also we have module sharing platform, what we call Ballerina Central. Anyone can push their modules here. Like if you are familiar with Maven Central, it's somewhat similar to that. You can publish your packages here, and anyone else can use it by importing them into the code. And also it has integrated with other operational stuff, including observability and CI/CD and other things. And also WSO2 provide a next-gen platform called Choreo, which is a SaaS offering, which closely which goes very closely with Ballerina, where it provides a full life cycle of application development into the in CI/CD as well as the DevOps. So I'm not going to details of it anyway, because my focus today is only Ballerina. So Ballerina has a huge community with us, and if you are happy to continue with us, and also if you would like to try, and if you would like to give some suggestions and everything, please feel free to join any of these channels. And we would like to have you, all of you, in our community and part of our community. So thank you very much for joining today's session. That's it that I've planned for today's session. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
There we go. Yeah, perfect. Great presentation, and got a lot of activity in the chat here. So, a lot of excitement around the ability to actually edit the errors within the code, which was, really cool feature and function there. Yeah, a couple questions at the end were basically, can the diagram be used as a drift control? Here, I'll put it up on the screen. Existing code LAC versus new resource via a pull request.
Yeah, actually the diagram is not it's not a static thing. So you can use existing code and get the diagram generated, as well as you can write the code and the diagram will generate it on the fly. We have both the capabilities.
Oh, great. And then let's see. Yeah, we had a question on the relationship of the language with Java.
Yeah, so right now the language is implemented is the compiler front end part is implemented using Java, and it generates Java bytecodes as well. So that means we are running on top of Java, But at the same time, as I mentioned before, we don't have any plans to make it a JVM language because semantics, concurrency handling, other things are very much different when it comes to Java and our language. So we designed it independently, and we are working on the native implementation, which is completely independent of Java. That means it will generate LLVM based, it's LLVM based thing which generates native bytecodes. And also when it comes to relationship with Java, since now it is generating Java bytecode, we have Java interoperability as well. That means if you have any library which is in Java, you can simply connect it using the Ballerina language. Basically, you can simply connect or call that code using Ballerina code. Like any other Ballerina module, you can simply call Java library as well. We have that capability.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, and then 2 more final questions here. So yeah, one is, what upcoming feature or change are you most excited about in Ballerina?
Okay, yeah. So right now the language is kind of more stable. We don't have a lot of upcoming features when it comes to the language syntax, but the upcoming things are workflow support. We don't have right now in the language. That's the language feature to come in, and also there are a lot of tooling capabilities coming in, with a lot of diagram capabilities, and to make it very much developer friendly when it comes to large integrations and applications. So I'm most excited about the workflow capabilities as well as the diagram capabilities.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, and then the last one here is, does the visual editing allow for custom types and icons?
Custom types in the sense, if you want to define some custom type, yes, you can do it in the diagram side as well as the code. When it comes to icons, actually icon comes from the uh, protocol itself. Sometimes it's if it's HTTP thing, what you see is a protocol icon which defined in the module what you have imported for that specific protocol. At the same time, let's say you are developing a module, for example, for a connector, let's say Salesforce. And if we have a Salesforce connector, but let's say you are also developing something, then you can define whatever the icon that you want in that module. And then when you import that thing, what you see in the diagram is the resource image that you use in that module itself. So you can customize the icons as well. Not all the icons, but only the imported module icons.
Sounds great. Yeah, appreciate great presentation here. Yeah, so this will actually, the same link everybody joined in today will turn into a recording at least within a few hours after we log off here. And so you can go back and watch it. And then we'll also be sending out a follow-up email with some of the other information, the groups and communities that you shared. And yeah, would love to support further in the connection with Ballerina after today's conversation.
Okay. Thanks, Jason, for great opportunity as well as moderating today's session. Thank you very much for your time and effort.
Yeah, thank you. This was great. And yeah, appreciate the community joining. We'll be sharing more events with Boston New Tech, Austin New Tech, and some of our other groups here as well. And definitely reach out if there's any other ways we can support. So
Thank
thanks
you.
again.
Thank you, everyone, for joining as well.
Thanks.